Welcome to Boek Meester. It is a strange and difficult time, but we are happy that we can still make our program, even if 95% of the audience is sitting at home, even if the writer isn't here with us, but on a big screen. I hope that the technology works well and that you're looking forward to it as much as I am. I love David Grossman's books. He's a writer who gets deep inside his characters, who wants to know everything of them. In his new novel, Life Plays With Me, translated into Dutch as Het leven speelt met mij, three generations come together on the inhospitable island of Goli, off the coast of Croatia, a prison island in a time of Tito. The main character, Vera, had been sentenced to 3 years there. She had to choose, betray her husband and falsely accuse him of Stalinism, or be taken away to Goli. She chose the latter, even though it meant that her 6-year-old daughter Nina was thrown out of the streets, onto the streets. They never talk about it. When Vera is 90 years old, she travels with her daughter and granddaughter to Goli to finally break the silence. Life Plays With Me is a gripping book about how an extreme choice can affect a family 3 generations. Can we still love someone after such a traumatic experience? And what do we need to be able to do that? A warm welcome, please, to David Grossman. Welcome. We are in a church in Rotterdam that also serves as a venue for debates. Where are you at the moment?
At my home in Mevaseret Zion, near Jerusalem, barefoot, if you are interested, with jeans. I think there are very few good things about the Zoom. My wife asked me, where are you today? I said, today I'm in Rotterdam, I think. And yesterday, where have you been? In Frankfurt. So just come on time for the pasta, she says, and everything.
Okay. You already had dinner, or you still have dinner later?
We shall have it later.
Have later. Is this also your study? Do you work here as well?
No, not in this room. This is our living room. Behind me, there is a picture by the painter Alon Porat, and it describes a Galilee view, trees that grow in the Galilee. And we always feel at home when we look at this picture, it is as if we open a window to the Galilee.
Mm-hmm. What is the quarantine situation in Israel at the moment?
Well, tomorrow we are starting to come out of the quarantine that lasted more than 30 days. Mm-hmm. And we hope that this time we shall not make the mistakes we did in the previous time when we came out of the lockdown too hastily, too fast. And this brought about terrible results. We were number 1 per capita in infections of the virus. Right now, because of the lockdown, it has reduced, but still everything is very fragile. And the feeling is that, well, it might take another phase of lockdown until we should be able to start to live some normal life side by side with the corona.
Mm-hmm. At the start of the corona crisis, you wrote an article in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz in which you emphasized the importance of imagination. I want to quote you: "It is like an anchor that we cast from the depths of despair into the future." What can imagination give us in these times?
First of all, it can give us some hope. There are some kinds of imagination. You might have a negative imagination which will portray for you nightmares and terrible things, and it can be very active, especially at times of crisis, of fear, of uncertainty. But I think we should insist on acting against the gravity of fear and of despair. And in that case, the imagination can give us a sense that not everything has been crushed inside us by the corona or by any arbitrary enemy. You know, it can be everything that that imposes itself on us, and we found ourselves helpless. But with imagination, we are able to remind ourselves that there is life waiting for us after this crisis, that we are not doomed to collaborate with the arbitrariness, that maybe by even thinking of getting out of it, we remind ourselves that still there is a kind of an enclave inside us, a bubble of freedom that allows us not to be a passive or paralyzed victim of the corona. And I learned that if I practice this muscle of the imagination, it is like a muscle. You have really to practice it. Suddenly you are not totally paralyzed when you face this arbitrariness. Not that you will change something really in the world, but the way you stand in front of it, the ability to move a little and look at it not from the place she wants to nail you down to, but you choose your place, you choose your words to describe it, not the words that others try to impose on you. Then suddenly you feel much more free, much more sovereign of your being, of your future.
Your muscle of imagination as a writer has been trained a lot. Can you give us some, for people who don't write, how to train this muscle?
Just to imagine how things could be, how we shall go back to our normal life, how the lights that have been shut down, the lights of culture, the lights of theater, lights of exhibitions, of concerts, that are now being shut down one after the other. And the feeling is that the humanity is really darkening itself without any choice. But one day will come, and like all the pandemics that used to rule over the world for some time and even killed millions and millions of people, they were beaten, they were over at a certain time. And people started to slowly, painfully go back to their life. You can imagine how your life will be after it. Maybe not all of us will go back to their old jobs because A, there might not be this job anymore, and B, maybe people will start to ask themselves, do I really want to continue to work in this place that is suffocating me for so many years and is not satisfactory to me? Do I really want to be part of this strange friendship where I really suffer all the time and being criticized? Do I want to remain in this marriage? Do I want to still hide my real gender? Maybe I want, to claim my right for having my life and not the life that people try to impose on me or prejudices are trying to impose on me. So there might be also some chances to change the situation. And I don't think
Opportunity.
I'm not. It will not happen immediately. It might take years, but maybe people will start to think, no, I'm living the life I don't like. Maybe I will try now to live other life. Especially, I think it might happen. And I'm not saying it in a naive way, but I really believe that it might cause a chance to change things because of the proximity to death, because of the understanding of how fragile life is, and that time is very short, outrageously short, and we should hurry and make something of our life.
You were the keynote speaker at the opening event of the Frankfurt Book Fair this Tuesday, or last Tuesday, sorry. You called on writers to become transient witnesses of the COVID-19 pandemic. What do you expect from writers and poets?
First of all, what I expect from writers is to write good stories. This is the main thing that what we should do. All the rest are sub-products of our situation as writers, our profession as writers. But I think we have one thing that we can offer or suggest. We don't have many skills and many talents usually. All the writers I know, including myself, are unfortunately very clumsy in their contact with reality. But there are some things, or one major thing that we can suggest, and this is an advantage that made us writers and maybe made us the people we are. And this is our ability to observe things, our talent of observation. This is something we know. We look at situations and we are able to see things that usually are overlooked or or unformulated in the right precision. I think we are people who know to insist on nuances. And we should remember that, because the world, when it's frightened, terrified, starts to talk of himself in a very thick language, in cliches, in prejudices, in generalizations. And I think this is something we can really tell people how important it is to insist on nuances, to insist on delicacies, on the ultimate precision. This is what we do, when you write
Do you write differently in this time than before the corona crisis?
First of all, I'm not writing right now. I look and I try to think, observe, and I try to think of what I will write. But still, even though I have 2 or 3 ideas that attract me, no one of them broke forward and forces me to write it. When the corona started, I made myself a kind of a funny agreement that I will write only books for children, and I will read only books that are older than me. Books for children in order to keep my optimism, and books that are older than me to benefit from their sobriety and wisdom. And so I did, I must say. But in the last weeks, I am tempted more and more to go and to write for grown-ups. And as I said, I have some ideas, but I will wait until one of them will become inevitable. This is usually the way I write. I have some ideas, and then one of them becomes inevitable. I must write it. And this is the one that I will spend the next 2, 3, maybe 5 years ahead from now.
Mm-hmm. Will it be connected with the time we live in now, or won't it play a role?
I'm not sure it will play a role. I will be very careful to write now a novel about what happens now, because I think it is too big. It's too big on us. We are standing in front of it, and it's very hard to understand the magnitude of this event without exaggeration, and to look into the process itself of the pandemic and what it does to individuals and to societies. Sometimes it is like looking straight into the sun. And then I remind myself, we writers, we like to look into suns, and quite a few of us, we looked at suns and we came back to tell the tale. But not now, not so quickly. We have still to digest, to understand, to be within this situation without any protective defense, just to expose ourselves to the radiation of this situation.
Just 1 or 2 questions about something else, about the Nobel Prize that went to the poet Louise Gluck last week. Do you have her work in your bookcase?
Do I have her work?
Yes. Have you read her poetry?
I read, yes. There were very few poems of her that have been translated, but those I read impressed me very much. Very serious and very deep, and I like the way she writes about love and about nature. Yeah, I think it's a good decision of the Academy.
If you were on the jury, who should win the prize next year?
Wow, come on. That's a tricky question.
Someone who looks in the sun.
Yeah. Well, maybe Salman Rushdie should get the prize right now. But I'm not in a position to decide such major decisions, and I am biased, as you can understand. So
yes,
because
you've been on the list of potential winners for some years now. In the Netherlands, the writer Harry Mulisch was also on the list, and he waited every year next to his phone. Is it an exciting day for you as well?
Let's say I'm more aware of the presence of my phone on this day. But when I heard that Louise Gluck won, we just went and had lunch, and that was over. I mean, it was okay. It was when the choice is good. There's no jealousy in a strange way When the choice is dubious, then other murky feelings can surface.
This year, no murky feelings?
No.
Last year?
No, because Olga Turkchuk, I am not sure I pronounce her name well.
Yeah, Olga
really
Turkchuk.
deserve it.
One last question. The Italian poet Quasimodo, I don't know if you know him. I lived in Italy and read his work. And I read also the letters of his wife. And she said he spent all the money he won with the Nobel Prize on other women. Do you already know what you are going to do with the 10 million krona if you win the Nobel Prize?
I must tell you, I never asked myself this question. I don't think that anything will be changed in my life, in the life of my family. We try to live our life as quiet and simple as possible. And at home, we are very private people. And I never asked myself this question, sorry.
Okay. We're going to talk about the novel. And I first want to start to talk about the background of Life Plays With Me. It is based on the life of a friend of yours, Eva Panic Nahir, if I pronounce the name correctly.
Yes.
Could you tell a bit more about her and how you became friends with her?
One day the phone rang. This phone that should ring from Sweden, you know, the same one, rang. And a lady with a very strange accent asked if it's me. And I said, yes, it is me. Her accent was a mixture of Serbo-Croatian, Hungarian, Hebrew accent, quite rare. And she had some remarks about an article that I wrote the other day, and she wanted to teach me where I wrote wrong and where I was just and right. And we started to talk, and she started to tell me her story, or rather she dropped all kinds of hints and clues about her past that made me very, very interested in her. And then at a certain point, at the most crucial point of the story, she stopped and she said, can I call you next week or the week after so we shall continue our talk? And I said, yes, please do. And so she did. And also in the second conversation, I noticed that at the most crucial moment, she stopped, just like Scheherazade, you know. She knew how writers are totally taken by stories. When there is a good story, the writer walks behind it like a child walks behind a butterfly. And so we started to talk, and then I met her in Jerusalem and in her home in a kibbutz in the north of Israel. And we became really good friends. She was more than 70 when we met, and we had a friendship of 20 years, and she died when she was over 90. And from the very beginning, she asked me, am I going to write her story? And I said, do you want me to write your story? And she said, yes, I want. And I said, you know, dear Eva, I might write your story, but you have to know I'm not a documentarist. I will not document you exactly as you are one-to-one, because you already exist. I don't have to create you if you already exist, but if you allow me to imagine you and fantasize you, if you allow me to write about you things that never have happened to you but could have happened, because they are in your DNA, but they were never worked out. So then I will write your story. And she said, of course, you are a writer, you are an artist. She was very generous and courageous about it.
And she died in 2015, age of 97. Did she read parts of the novel?
No, because I started writing it only after she passed away, because there were other books that I wanted to read that were so inevitable for me. Books about life after a loss, and books about, I wrote 3 books in this period. The horse walks into a bar and falling out of time, and the woman who escapes the news. And then when I finished them, and then she died, and then came a moment when suddenly I felt, yes, I want to write her story. And it took me, I think, almost 3 years to write it. And I got, I think, very close to her by writing and by understanding her and by trying to see reality through her eyes, even the things that through my eyes would have been regarded as a tragic mistake. But when I saw it through her eyes, well, then I understood new things.
I want to go one step back. The conversations you had with Eva, because at the core of her life, there's this difficult choice: betray and falsely accuse her husband posthumously of Stalinism, or be sent to the prison on Goli, on the island, and not see her daughter grow up. She chose the latter. Did you speak with her about this decision, and what were these conversations like?
Yeah, we spoke quite often about her decision, which was very hard for me to understand, and I understand it more now. Not that I would have done the same decision, but I know that she was, Eva Panich Nahir, was an idealist in a way, and she was loyal to ideals and to ideas in a rigid way sometimes, in a tough way sometimes. And she, you know, she was a child of an era where the idea of men was bigger than the individual man, the individual person. And to sacrifice someone for an ideal, or to sacrifice yourself for an ideal, was something not very rare. Millions have done it. In our era, which is much more practical, valueless and cynical, it's hard to understand it. But I had to understand it through her eyes, becoming her. And I also wish that my reader, the readers of this book, will not judge her, will not verdict her because what she has done, but will go all the way with the doubt that she had, all the way with the hesitations, all the way with the inner contradiction that such a person had in her personality. She was fanatic when it came to politics and to ideas, but she was so soft and empathetic and caring for other people and so humane. And I was fascinated by this mixture, with this quite rare mixture. And the book tries to follow this situation, not to judge her. Everyone can have his or her opinion, but it's too an easy job. You know, I wish that people will remain with the doubt, with the very rare option that they might find themselves in such a terrible situation, and what will be their considerations then.
You also spoke with Eva's daughter, Tiana, for the book. What did you ask her? What did you want to know from her?
Well, everything actually. How was it to be the daughter of Eva? How was it to be her daughter before the abandoning and after it? How was it to come back and to see her mother come back and to start to live together again as a mother and a daughter? What is the price she paid for this tragedy that she went through in her life?
Weren't you afraid to know too much of the story? You said earlier you're not a documentary writer. Where is the place for imagination in this process, or isn't it a struggle?
There was not struggle, no. There were some things I wanted to be in the book and some things I wanted to fantasize. And don't ask me which were the things that
I won't.
No, I will not tell you. And I was very impressed by Tiana Wedges, very clever and courageous person and very optimistic, which is something that one cannot guess, that someone who went through such a devastating experience at the age of 6.5, that she will be so open, so trust-giving, so optimistic. And some people ask me, what is the lesson you get from this book? And I said, first, you know, I'm not sure I want to get lessons from books, but if I got something, it is something that happened out of the book, out of the covers of the book. And this is the relationship that these two women, Eva and her daughter, Tiana, were able to form after the tragedy they went through. And if there is a source or a spot of optimism in this book, it is also there in the ability to reconcile, not to forget, because how can Tiana forget what has been done to her? How can Eva forget what she has done? So not to forget, but to find ways to live side by side with the knowledge of this terrible atrocity and their wish to become a mother and a daughter again, and the love they had towards each other. It did not happen easily, it did not happen immediately. It took some years, maybe decades, until they really love each other and they understood each other. And Tiana even justified the decision of her mother, which is something that is almost hard to believe. But she said she had no choice. She had to choose this way.
But you talk about forgiveness. It's not about forgiveness, you said, because how could she forgive? But isn't it the only thing a daughter wants, or the mother wants from her daughter, to be forgiven?
No, I think Eva was a very sober personality, and she knew what she can ask for, what she can hope for. Mm-hmm. And she told me more than once that Tiana will never be able to forgive her for what she has done.
Mm-hmm. Let's go into the book. The narrator of Life Plays With Me is a 39-year-old filmmaker, Gili, the granddaughter of Vera, whose character is based on Eva. Gili's name means in Hebrew, be happy. Why did you choose to let her tell the story and not Vera?
Because of the very special style of talking that Vera had, which I thought can be credible, but you cannot make her the story of the teller of the whole story. Then it might make her almost as a funny person or even a caricature. And the last thing one can think of when you think of Eva Panishna here is a caricature. She is absolutely.
This is because people who haven't read the book, Vera talks in her Croatian Hebrew accent, translated in Dutch, of course, in the Dutch.
Yes. And Ruben van Heslet, my translator, did a marvelous job, I hear, in the way he conveyed this special dialect into Dutch. I listen.
Did you discuss with him? Did he have questions for you during translating the novel? Ruben van Hasselt, the translator.
Maybe I'll tell you a little later about the translation process, because just to answer your question about whom I wanted to be the storyteller. I didn't want it to be Nina, because Nina, she lives in a kind of a special bubble that is in contact and then detached from reality.
Nina is the abandoned daughter of Vera. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, you're right. And she lives in a very special dimension of living just in parallel to her real life, to the life that she should and could have had. And this is obviously because of being abandoned by her mother when she was 6.5. And the story is also her journey, her trip to eventually unite with herself, even for some short time, but to be herself and to understand what has been done to her, the thing that she suspected all her life, but nobody really told her what really has happened, then made her abandoned by her mother. I don't want to tell too much. I don't want to give spoilers, because the story has many unexpected turns, and I try to protect it. But you ask, yeah.
No, you can. You wanted to tell something about the translator, I think.
Yeah. In this book, like in the last 3 books that I've written, I did something unusual. I gathered 12 or 15 sometime of my translators to a translation center in Strahlen. the city of Strahlen in Germany, not far away from the Dutch border. In this Center for Translation, which was established by the father of my German translator, Anne Birkenauer, they give you conditions where you can sit with your translators and work. So usually a writer sits with one translator. I wanted all of them because I knew it will spare me a lot of time to have them all in one place. And for 5 days, we lived inside the book. It's a very exceptional experience, and I'm not sure many people experienced it. We started to talk in the language of the book, with the special language of Vera. We were supposed to work from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock in the evening, and we didn't stop then because we were so taken and so swept and immersed into the story. And we made the people sit in kind of small groups around the round table. You know, the Slovakian languages, the Norwegian and the Swedish, the Slovak and the Czech and the Romanian. And there were little groups, and I read to them from the first page until the last page. I read the whole book for them. And I found it very significant that they will hear the melody in which I hear the story. Because to solve problems of words, word for word, is not too complicated. But to find the right melody, this is the secret of a story. Because I think every book has a melody of its own. Mm-hmm. Usually when I finish writing a book, the last version is the version in which I read out loud all the book, and then so many mistakes surface. And I read somewhere that Gustave Flaubert, the giant writer, used to stand in his window and to shout out all the novels he wrote. I'm much more merciful to my neighbors, and I don't shout out, but I learned that reading out loud, it exposes the book in such a way that it really uplifted enormously. And so that's what we had in this session, in this seminar in Strahlen, and later in the city of Sisak in Croatia, where we did this gathering for the last book, which takes place, part of it, in Croatia. And for these 5 days, we tried to, it's not only to find solutions, but it's to understand the heart of translation. Because just think, I write in Hebrew. It's a language that counts back almost 4,000 years. The Bible was written in Hebrew. So many associations of the modern Hebrew today are based on the Bible or the Mishnah or the Talmud or other layers of the Hebrew, many, many layers of the Hebrew. And now my Dutch translator, Ruben, who is a wonderful translator, he comes and he has to translate it to Dutch. But the Dutch words has other connotations, other meanings, other magnetic field of significance. So what do we read when we read translation? And I noticed other things as well. For example, there was moments when, for example, my dear German translator, Anne, she said about a phrase in the book, she said, but this is so sentimental, it's almost kitsch. And immediately the Catalan and the Spanish and the Italian translators jumped on her and said, no, it's not sentimental, it's emotional, it's exactly the right temperature. So you could understand that translation is so much a question of the psychology of the translator himself, but also the psychology of the language and the how do you say, the tonnage and the voltage of the language.
So, did you give Ruben the advice to read out his translation out of the window as well?
I give this advice to all my translators, and I even demand this from them, that they will read out loud, and I think they understand now how important it is.
But back to your characters, Vera, she has never spoken out. She's not. She was imprisoned for 3 years for doing hard labor on Goli Otok, the island. But she never told her daughter Nina. Why couldn't she tell her?
Well, sometimes the things that are the most crucial in our life, we just don't have words to describe them. And maybe she was afraid from what it will do to her daughter to know the whole truth. Maybe she was afraid to hear herself saying these things out loud. And so she established this secret, which is a terrible secret and distorted secret. And because it has not been ever formulated, not have been uttered in word, it became like this wound that goes in the family for 3 generations until the trip they took to Goli Otok in my book, and there they found the words to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Before we go to this trip they make, Nina felt betrayed by her mother her entire life, and she wanders the world from job to job, but also from man to man. Why is life so much more difficult for her than for her mother, who was even tortured on Goli?
Well, it's a question of different personalities. There are people who are stronger in certain points and weaker in other points. I think what Nina felt is a deep sense of betrayal, but she was not sure really what the betrayal was. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not going to elaborate here because I want the readers to enjoy even the doubts of the story. And Nina, again, I'll say she's like those people that sometimes we meet, people who live in parallel to the life they should have had. It can be people who are suffocated in a job that is not suitable for them. It can be people who are trapped in marriage that are not appropriate for them. It can be people who are hiding their real gender for years. And the thing is that we are all very flexible creatures and we adjust to such distortion. We teach ourselves to live in a very efficient way in parallel to the life we should have had, to our real selves. But the real self who has been hidden and suppressed keeps sending us pulses of insults, of grief even, because someone must have been killed in order to allow the other self to flourish. And it is so rare in life that we get the chance to unite with our real self. In that sense, literature is much more generous than life because it gives you a kind of a second instance. You know, after you have failed in your appeal to the first instance, like in court, then literature or art gives you this chance to appeal again. And maybe when you appeal again and you describe your tragedy, even in other words, then your voice might be heard and you will get this chance to become yourself. I think of Dovale, the protagonist in my book, A Horse Walks into a Bar, who really, because of something that happened to him when he was 14, got more and more distanced from himself, because to be himself, like for Nina in my story, to be herself is so painful. It's just touching an open wound all the time. So
is that why she also leaves her child?
Well, this is, I mean, when you ask such a question, you assume that there is only one reason for such a deed. Usually in what we do in our life, as you very well know, there are many reasons for every significant act. It's very comfortable to choose one act and to focus on that. I think that there were other reasons, but again, I'll leave it to the book and to the readers, and I will humbly withdraw from this debate.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about Gili's father, Raphael, who was also abandoned by Nina, but he still loves her the rest of his life. And it puzzled me a bit. Can you explain me what he feels?
Yeah, he feels love. he is in love with her since he saw her, and until now.
How does that work?
Well, there are so many kinds of love, and I think we should not narrow ourselves to one sort of love or one option of love. Even just look at this story. There are three different loves between the three women and Raphael. First, the love of Eva, who adopted him, and this is true fact, adopted him when he was 16, and because she saw him, she decided to marry his widow father. And Rafi, when he became her adopted son, he allowed Eva for the first time to feel motherly feelings. She had Nina, and yet she did not feel towards Nina what she felt towards Raphael. And then he was the spouse of Nina for many years, and she tormented him, and she loved him, and she pushed him, and she drew him back, and she was very manipulative, but actually she was very miserable and tormented, and I think because of that she was so manipulative towards him. And she knows that he is the solid ground under her feet. And he has this stability, and I think the three women are attracted to what he suggests them. I mean, if there is a wound that goes in the family, there is something in the character of Rafi, that is the medication, the ability to heal. And each of the women finds in him what she needs. And there is Gili, his daughter. And I think the love of them is the most optimistic thing, because they are really good in relationship of a man and a father and a daughter. And she regards him as her mentor, and he teaches her how to make movies, because he used to be a film personality in Israel. So it's three different kinds of love. And if there was another woman, there were four kinds of love. Because I think I wanted to show really the multifacetedness, the diversion of love.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Raphael proposes making a film on the island of Goli. You talked about it earlier. The first thing I thought, why not in the kibbutz? Why does the ancient Pharaoh have to be dragged over to Croatia, to an island, because he's 90 years plus? Is it about the journey, or is it about the place, the island of Goli?
Both. I think a journey means to change your positions, to change your ideas, even to change the way you look at things, and to be there in Goli Otok. It is a very strong place. I can tell you. I mean, it's a place that changes something in your experience and in the way you look at things. I went twice on the island of Goli. At the first time, there was a huge storm. I was never witness to such a storm in my life in Israel. And the second time, some months later, there was a terrible heat, more than 42 degrees. And to be there and to see the ugliness of the brutality of this place. It is a brutal place. It was a prison for women, and there was also a prison for men. And they had to do imposed or forced labor. Eva, the little lady, very little, very tiny, she had to roll a rock against the slope of a hill. And she did it 12 hours a day for months, 12 hours a day. You know, I tried just to push one rock. It was impossible for me to do it. And she did it.
What was the purpose of the island? Was it to re-educate people?
Yes.
Because that was something I read, but you don't re-educate people you destroy them by letting them push a rock.
Yeah, this is what you say now in 2020, but in the year of 1951, under the regime of Tito, after the ugly faces of communism and their rehabilitation camps, we know that, of course, you are right, you cannot educate people, you just make them more hateful and vengeful. if it does not kill them. And many were killed, many were murdered even in those camps that Tito created. Sorry.
What if you visit the island? Is there an explanation? Is there something that tells how many people died there or have been imprisoned there?
There is a little museum there and a little train, like a toy train that goes between the different camps, but it does not really tell what it was there, and it covers more than it reveals. It's a very strange atmosphere to be there, to know that it's a kind of a tourist attraction with a little restaurant there and a little cafe, and you can photograph yourself dressed like one of the guards of this place. I mean, horrible things. Mm-hmm. And the place itself is so depressing to think that so many horrible things, torments and interrogation and humiliation were happening, that they happened in this place. It's really physically hard it was for me. And thinking of her all the time, I was there with her, I felt I brought her with me. Mm-hmm. Think about this lady that had to be exposed to this brutality is unbearable. And therefore, I gave her this little story of the plant that she was supposed to put her shadow on it, so it will not be burnt by the sun, by the strong sun. And I felt I must have some ingredient of good with capital G in this brutal, violent place. And Vera is really doing good by protecting this little plant, even though at the same time she had abandoned her daughter. But she needed to be good, and I think we feel it sometimes, the need to do good thing as a protest against what we see in reality.
At the end of the book, Raphael whispers into his daughter's ear, ask Vera if she would make the same choice today. But Gili doesn't get the opportunity to put a question to her grandmother. Did you ask Eva that question?
Yes, and she said she would have done it again.
She would have done it again?
That's what she said, and I even witnessed when she told it to her daughter, which was a harsh moment. But she... Mm-hmm. As daughter said, you see, this is why I love Mama, because she cannot lie, she cannot beautify reality. Yeah.
I'm a bit silent of the. I thought she would come to an other opinion maybe later on in life, but because it is the decision she made in her life, and she stood at it the rest of her life. She never.
Yeah.
Although she saw her daughter. Suffering.
Yeah, I think that, as her daughter said, if mother confesses that it was a mistake, she would not be able to continue her life. She will fall apart, she will crumble down. Mm-hmm. And maybe she was right.
Mm-hmm. I want to give the audience the opportunity to ask questions, and they can write them down in a chat box, and then we choose your camera. I think that's the best way. We turn the video on. So I don't know if there are any questions, and otherwise I have some more questions for you, Mr. Grossman. Maybe one more question about before we go to the questions from the audience, because they have to write them down. You described Vera, or not you described Eva as in an interview, or no, in a book as Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf in one person. Is the wolf part, is this the part we talked about, is this about concerning the decision she made?
It's about the way she judged people in a very stiff way sometimes. and the way she was so tough about ideologies, the way she was, for example, against the occupation that Israel occupies the Palestinians. At the age of 95, she still went to demonstrate. It's not an easy thing. I'm talking to you now after just coming back from yet another demonstration. We go every week to a demonstration on one of the bridges near our home, and we demonstrate against the corrupt Benjamin Netanyahu, our prime minister. And I must tell you, it's not always a nice experience because you are subject to insults and to spitting and sometimes even to more violent reactions. And she was not afraid of anything. You looked at this lady and you understood nothing can really frighten her. And by the way, when she was in Goli Otok, she was probably one of the very few people there, very, very few, who did not give away their friends, who did not betray anyone, who were totally loyal to their ideas to the extent that at a certain point, and this was after she came out of prison, out of the island, and she wanted that her beloved Rade, her husband, will be buried in a proper way, in a proper grave. And she started to bombard Marshal Tito with letters until he couldn't take it anymore. And he called on Moshe Piade, his Jewish assistant, and he said, who is this lady? Who is this lady who is not afraid of Tito? And he gave her what she wanted. So she can really bend walls and mountains to her will. But at the same time, as I said, the softest, the most caring and empathetic person.
Mm-hmm. We have some questions. Peter, how do you want to do it? Just you can turn who can turn his or her video on? People with questions, then we...
I saw someone asking me if I can read in Hebrew for a minute.
Okay, let's start with that one.
Yeah, I like it. I like the Hebrew to echo wherever it's possible. I will read for, let's say, 2 minutes from...
One moment, he is going to read a part, yes?
From the Hebrew, from the very beginning of the book, so no explanations needed. רפאל היה בן 15 כשמתה אימא שלו וגאלה אותו מייסוריה. גשם ירד על חברי הקיבוץ שהצטופפו תחת מטריות בבית הקברות הקטן. טוביה, אביו של רפאל, מרר בבכי. שנים טיפל באשתו במסירות, ועכשיו נראה אבוד ומיותם. רפאל, במכנסיים קצרים, עמד נבדל מהאחרים, וכיסה את ראשו ואת עיניו בקפוצ'ון, שלא יראו שהוא לא בוכה. הוא חשב, עכשיו שהיא מתה, היא יכולה לראות את כל הדברים שחשבתי עליה. זה היה בחורף 1962. אחרי שנה פגש אבא שלו את ורה נובק, שבאה לארץ מיוגוסלביה, והם התחילו לחיות כזוג. ורה הגיעה לישראל עם ביתה היחידה, נינה, נערה בת 17, גבוהה ובהירת שיער, שבפנים הארוכות שלה, שהיו חברות ויפות מאוד, כמעט לא הייתה הבאה.
Thank you. I think Anke or Anske? Yes.
Yes, was my question. So thank you, Mr. Grossman.
Okay, you want him to...
You want to hear the Hebrew?
I didn't read the book, so I can't compare it to the translation, but I will read the book after I heard you, because it's very inspiring, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Other questions? I can't read it from here. Otherwise, I have some more questions, and we come late to the questions from the audience. What surprised me, I read your previous novel, A Horse Walks into a Bar, and the tone was completely different from the tone in this book, Life Plays With Me. Do you have different voices? Do you regard it as that?
Yeah, I like to find new melodies to every book. I want to keep myself entertained and alert, and I try as much as I can to create, not only in the storyline, but also in the language. The language is so important. So much is revealed, of course, through the language. And I just this morning I woke up and I thought, how lucky I am, how privileged I am that I still have this novel in front of me that I didn't even start, but it's in front of me, and it can be everything, and it can be told in so many ways and so many dialects. And first of all, I don't know if this idea that now attracts me, I don't know if it ends up as a big novel or as a haiku poem. Everything is possible.
But do you find first your story or your melody?
There are no rules for that. Sometimes it's this and sometimes it is that. But one thing I can say, and I said before how lucky and privileged I am, I think in a world that now, because of the pandemic, is shrinking, is narrowing down, and people are refraining from touching each other or being in any contact or hugging each other, and there are all capsules of people. And the feeling is that people are rejected and rejecting. And me as a writer, and writers in general, we have this privilege of all the time widening ourselves and creating and giving birth to things. And it's again such an act against the gravitation of the despair and the sadness that I feel around me.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk, there's a part of this, this difference, there's also a striking similarity between the two books, the last two books. Both are about characters that deal with the loss of a parent. Would you say that fear of loss is their driving force in life?
I think it's something that is very present in life. For some of us, it's a paralyzing power. For others, it's more of a motivation to move forward or to learn again how to live after the loss of a beloved one. I can tell you, I wrote several books of loss. Me and my family, we have lost our son Uri 14 years ago and some months in the war of Lebanon. And I learned one thing at this period. You know, nobody knows what happens behind this hermetic wall of death. Nobody ever came back to tell. And I, as a secular person, as a non-believer, I don't believe that there is anything there but void, but nothingness. And yet I found out that there is a way in which I can get a glimpse of what happens on the other side, and at the same time of the plenty of life and vitality that exists on the side of the living people. And this is art, literature, music, and theater, and movies. This is the only place where we can experience simultaneously both the nothing, the total nothing, and the total yes, the total be, the total plenty of life. This is the great power of art, I think. And when I think of books that have read me, have raised me and educated me from childhood until now, these are always books that happened on this very throbbing, delicate point of the simultaneous experiences.
When you write about loss, is there a way to deal with it? Because you said in an interview I watched yesterday in the evening at home, a conversation you had with Bas Heijnen, I think in The Hague it was some years ago, and you said you were mapping the grief. Could you tell something about that, or could you explain what you meant?
After I experienced the loss of my son, nothing was taken for granted anymore. You know, it's an experience that can totally devastate your life. Even staying alive is not taken for granted. You have to ask yourself the question, do I want to stay in this life that does not contain him, does not include him? At the time I was halfway through the novel about the woman who escapes the news of the death of her son in a war. And I thought I will never be able to save this book. And then after some days of the Shiva, you know, the Shiva is the 7 days of lamenting that we have in Judaism. I went back to my room, to my study, and I started to think of the characters, and I started to think of how do I bring them to life? How do I find in myself the energy to infuse into them life and light and warmth and love and sexuality and humor and worldview? And so step by step, I found in myself all of these things that I didn't know existed in me. And the need to give them to the characters, this what actually drew me back to life. And I felt, I wrote later another book called Falling Out of Time. And this is in a different situation. This is after the loss, not the fear from the loss, like in A Woman Escaping the News, but the feeling after the loss. And I read several books that talked about such experience, and some of them were very good books, but none of them answered my need to articulate intimately and privately what I felt, because there is a kind of an official language of the grief. And the usual cliches in which people are talking about grief. And I felt that this is imposed on me because I am a bereaved father, but I want to find not this surname of the bereaved father. I want to find the private, intimate name of myself that has been so devastated by the catastrophe. And I wrote this book, Falling Out of Time, in order to, as you quoted, to remap my place. I remember I told my wife, I feel that as if we were sent to an island of exile, and like Goliotok, maybe. And I was there, and it's quite a terrible place, this island that nothing grows in it. And I felt I have to give names, my private, intimate names, to all the places there on this island, and to make it mine. And for me to make a place mine is to describe it with my own words.
Thank you. I see some more questions, and you can read them as well, but we want to, it would be nice to let the audience ask the question themselves. So please put your video on if you have a question. If your hair looks good. Otherwise, we're going to read them. I don't see any movement. The screen is too far away for me to read them. Could you pick a question, Mr. Grossman?
I don't see any question written here.
Okay. Oh, Christian has a question, I see.
Hi, Christian. Yeah, I see you.
You have to unmute, Christian.
Unmute?
Yeah.
Yes. I'll read a question by Giovanna from the chat. She asks, what do you consider to be the main lesson from this book? Do we need nowadays more people who believe in ideals?
I'm a little reluctant to talk about the message that comes from my books. Really, I think it's not for the writer to tell about it. The writer should only aspire and wish to write a good story. And if you push me and press me to give you a message, I will relate it to these days, yes, to these days of the corona, and to say that there is, in writing, in art, there is something optimistic. There is something that is looking for life, well, but again, I hear myself and I don't like myself when I say that. So please forgive me. I don't have an answer for that.
Mm-hmm. What do you, because you're not writing a novel at the moment, you said you have 3 ideas where you move around, I think, and is your life different now than when you write a novel? How would you? What if we ask your wife? When you write a novel, are you a better person in your marriage or in life, or when you don't work on a novel?
I think I'm a much more interesting person when I write. And I very much like the state of mind and the state of the body even of being in a story, because I feel very concentrated and very alert and all the time waiting for hints to come from the world, and everything can be a fragment of a story, and people come and tell me stories, you know, and to tell a story to a writer, it's like to embrace a pickpocket. Never trust a writer, because the story will always have priority on other values and ideals. And I feel as if I have fever, but I don't have fever, I hope. And everything becomes so condensed and so rich, and the dreams are so full of life and are so literary. So of course I prefer much more the phases of being in a book. And I try to minimize very much the periods between books. I tell you also, I think when I'm writing, everything is meaningful. Almost every fact can fit into some place in the story. And my life become much more relevant for me. It sounds strange, but I feel the sweetness of relevance, because as I said, everything that I see, every movement, every gesture, every remarks that somebody makes on the street or on television, I spy on it, and I feel the emotional voltage of me is so strong, and I feel totally exposed.
Sounds as falling in love.
In a way, yes. Yeah, I think in a way, yes. I agree. It's this kind of excitement.
And when are you convinced to write a novel? Because you have 3 ideas, 2 won't be turned into a novel. When do you know the point? When are you convinced I'm going to write this novel?
Yeah, it differs from book to the next, of course, but there is a moment where it's like, you know, having kind of an electric spark. And you say, yes, now I got it. Now I understand exactly. This is what I want to tell. And it's not a logical explanation, but just as you say, as like in falling in love, suddenly this specific person becomes the center of all life, and everything is translated to the terms of this person. And there is a need, a really almost a physical need to write it, to document it, to be within this story. I know it sounds crazy maybe to people who never experienced writing, but there is something so absorbing in an irresistible way. And usually we have control of, or we have the illusion of having control of many parts of our life. But the feeling of losing control and allowing the story to kidnap you and to make you write against your interests. You know, sometimes you write things and you know it will cause troubles with your wife, with your children, with your prime minister, and yet who cares? I mean, the only thing that you care for is this magnetic field of the story, and your loyalty is only to the story, and you are willing to hurt the people who are near you, even though, from my experience, when they have read what I wrote about them, they felt that they got something from it. They saw themselves from maybe their blind spot that everyone has in his or her brain.
And are you a fast writer then? Does the story write itself?
No, not always. I mean, every story has his personality, as I said. And the couplehood is different in every time. The couplehood between the writer and the book is always different, and the experience is different. And you know how you enter a book, you never know how you will come out of the book. And I'm a writer that writes many versions, and I'm not talking about cut and paste in the computer, but really typing them with my fingers again and again and again. And always I remember when I was writing, I wrote a book called the Book of Intimate Grammar. I think in Dutch it's the Grammar of the Feelings, maybe. And I finished version number 12, and I came to my wife and I said, it's over, at last, this version is over. And she gave me one of her looks and she said, but tomorrow you will start version number 13, isn't it? And I said, well, yes. Do you know why is that? She's a psychologist and very wise, so why is that? And she said, let's do a kind of experiment. And we took from the 12 versions one paragraph and we cut it, the pages, and we sellotaped it on the wall, and we went and read from 1 to 12. Now, between 1 and 3, there were huge differences. 1 and 5, they started to shrink. The last versions, there was only, very peculiar corrections. For example, there was an exclamation mark that was totally needless, redundant. Or there was a word that the whole paragraph actually said it without using their name, the name of this word. So why do we need it? And then you came to the final conclusion of this paragraph, and you felt that the whole musicality of it is concluded, and you don't have to write it anymore. So,
but did you know the end of Life Plays With Me when you started the novel?
No, I never, not only in this book, I never allow myself to know the end. I want to be surprised by my books. I want, more than that, I want to be betrayed by my books. I want them to take me to places that, as I said, my interest is not to reveal them to the whole world. But actually, by betraying me, they are more loyal to me than I dare to be, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I see 2 questions, or am I not sure? Yes? Okay.
You'll have to read me because I see there is nothing written on the screen.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if I cannot see myself or hear myself. Well, I can hear myself but not see myself. Thank you for this very inspiring interview, both of you. I have a question. Mr. Grossman, he told us in the beginning that he was writing books for children. For me, books are very important. I really love to read the different layers in personality, in plots, etc. I was wondering if he has an idea about how we could get the youth back to books, because they are so distracted by social media. So I was wondering, because he's still writing books for children, if he has an opinion about that.
Yeah, I think the social media is a very tough competition for books. It's hard to fight it. I think we should try to give children the habit of reading or listening to a story when they are very young, hoping that after they cross the inevitable period of being swept into the social media way of communicating, they will come back to reading books when they are a little older. Anyhow, I find a lot of importance in reading good night stories for children, because I think the roots and the basis can be there in the midnight story, in the bubble of the good night story, not midnight, the good night story. Because, for a child, the night is a very frightening situation. Usually he or she, they are alone in their bed and they continue to hear, they hear the voices of the other members of the family that continue to do what they do. And the night is shadows and the voices come from different places, and the night is dreams and nightmares, and children do not always understand the rules of a dream. They do not understand that their mama or papa cannot penetrate to their dream and redeem them from any trouble there. And the book that is being read to the child can be like a protective entity, like a kiss in the cheek of the child before he or she sails into darkness, into the night, into dreams and nightmare. But it's even more than that. I think that if you really read your child a story and you don't regard it as a nuisance, as a duty that you must do before you put him to death, but you really enjoy these 10, 15 minutes of being together very intimately, even physically, and there is the books might have another language than the language that the child is used to, another sense of humor, another sense of surrealism, so many new things. And I remember myself as a child listening and looking at my father when he read to me when I was 4 and 5. And my father was a very authoritative person. But when he read to me the stories, he allowed himself to go back almost to his childhood. I was looking at him and I was fascinated to see his face that I never knew out of this bubble of the Good Night Story. So it's a chance for both grown-ups and children to come together like tourists to this bubble of the Good Night Story.
That's beautiful to hear. Is there one last question, or there's? I think everyone going to read a book to his child to wake them up. There's yes. You have to start talking.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, I was muted. I first want to thank you, David Grossman, for writing. I love your books. I've read most of them.
Thank you.
For this special book, I have a question: why you took the camera to have the story told?
Because I wanted, there is an explanation in the book, in the story, that Nina knows that she is going to be demented, and she wants to have a movie that will remind her of who she used to be before the disease and who her family used to be. But it was a little more than that. I felt that because we know that everything that is shown by or photographed by the video camera will be shown to Nina in different times in the future, suddenly an air of the future penetrates the present. So it's a delicate dance between the present and the future. And also I like to bring into literature other arts. For example, in The Horse Walks into a Bar, it is the stand-up comedy. And in Falling Out of Time, it's poetry and maybe even opera, because I feel that this book will get to its essence only when it will be sung. In another book, in the Woman Who Escapes the News, the first 100 pages are like radio play, voices in the dark. So I like this mixture and to see what happens to both arts when they merge. But thank you for the question.
I want to thank you for answering all the questions and for being with us online, and all the people who are with us as well. I hope to meet you once in Rotterdam, that we can have a live conversation.
Okay.
And that the pandemic will be over and we will have a new novel of you. So thank you very much for being here. We'll be back next week with Ayelet Gundar-Goshen to have a conversation with her about her novel Liar. I read it last week and I really enjoyed the story. So I hope you will join us as well. Thank you, Mr. Grossman.
Thank you, Ernest. And please don't call me Mr. Grossman. After 2 hours, we can, I think, address each other in first names.
My mother learned me that. You should meet my mom. Also Wolf. What kind of pasta are you going to eat, David?
The usual macaroni.
Sorry?
I mean, the main thing about pasta is the sauce, as you know. So,
Yes. Yeah. What kind of sauce, I mean?
So this is a family secret. I cannot share it with the whole world. Sorry.
Thank you. All have a nice evening wherever you are. Thank you very much for the conversation.
Bye. Ciao, ciao. Bye.